I bought a farm.
Ben Jordan was tired of spending 18 hours a day working in a cramped, dark, sonically dead basement studio. So he bought a farm and decided to turn an old creepy barn into a state-of-the-art recording studio and video soundstage. While this property came with plenty of acres of beautiful land and livestock, it also came with a whole heap of unique challenges.
For example, high-speed internet, keeping a barn in the woods cool and dry without creating a bunch of noise, eliminating ground hums, making a professional mixing room on a DIY budget, energy efficiency, construction dust nearly destroying all of my gear, breaking the bone in the bottom of my foot, electric shock burns, this gardener named Jesus, and then this other gardener who helped me build sonic crystals, and doing all of that without going completely broke. And all of that is just a tiny fraction of what I'm about to show you in this video.
Oh my gosh!
I'm not even sure if it was a terrible idea or not. Let's go. So this room is where I spent the vast majority of my time over the last 5 years. I renovated it all by myself in 2019. It took me about a month, and I had a total budget of under $12,000. And it was great when I worked on my own music or music jobs all day, every day, and YouTube was just a hobby. But as my workflow diversified, things got really stressful and cluttered. Obviously, I managed to make it work, but I realized that often the majority of my time in the production of a video was spent setting things up or tearing things down or troubleshooting signal noise or looking for things. So about a year ago, I started looking for a new place. I looked at places around here in Georgia, I looked at places in New Mexico, and I just kind of gave up. And then one morning in March, while laying in bed, I randomly opened a real estate app and saw this very unique property. It looked like some kind of farm where the house was a giant cabin and then there was a barn, or it was some type of bar or venue. I couldn't really tell, and it was only a few miles from Atlanta, yet it looked like it was in the middle of nowhere. It had just been listed that morning, and I called my real estate agent. The time from the house being listed to the time that it was under contract was less than 24 hours. And then the vast amount of work and responsibility that I had just signed myself up for contractually smacked me in the face. Like, this is an objectively insane project to do alone, especially while still working and earning the income needed to pay for and maintain it. I just started designing a renovation for the barn and figuring out specifically what needed to be done, and what was scarier was my fear of what I wasn't seeing. So I decided to call some contractors. I ended up going with a company called Southern Superior, basically because they were entirely full service, meaning that the hot potato of liability stayed in one place. That's actually really important because, at least in my prior experiences, pretty much across the board in the construction industry, blaming another company is a routine way to not be accountable. So one company, one entity responsible when something goes wrong. And in this case, the person representing the accountable entity is Brock Knight, which is a pretty epic name, by the way. Like, if I were interviewing for a CEO job or something and the guy before me was named Brock Knight, I'd just be like, you know what? Never mind. I'm just gonna get out of here, beat traffic. I think Uber's hiring anyway. After signing the contract, it didn't take long for Brock to just search my name and realize that this project might be seen by millions of people. So he pitched a collaboration of sorts to do a proper HD TV style video, but with the technical candor of what goes into building a recording studio.
Hey y'all, this is Brock Knight with Southern Superior Construction. We're on here on a beautiful day, on day one of a construction project for Mr. Ben Jordan here. We have our interior designer, Miss Layla Isu, and we are now looking at the plans. We're looking at the whole project in general. We have some selections to do, countertops, we have some cabinets, we got HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and framing, and a bunch of amazing details.
Can I take my helmet off?
It did look good though.
All right, so we're resetting?
Huh?
Start from the beginning?
Sure.
Yeah.
I like the helmet.
It's up to you. Do you want it or not? The helmet. Brock can wear the helmet since he's like.
Yeah. Now I'll.
Because you're like the YouTuber, you're the creator. You're the
Yeah.
Action.
So stay tuned. We're getting started now.
Cool. Good.
And I'll do it to yours too. I'm sorry. I bought a farm. The problem with making a video like this is that I am just awkward as f***. After a few days, we just sent the camera crew home and I decided to talk to y'all in selfie mode for the next 2 months. Early on, I asked my community here on YouTube if they had any specific questions, and there were a lot. So thanks for making this video super easy for me to make watchable. So here's the barn/abandoned honky-tonk bar a few months ago. Snakes were living in it. There was no HVAC, the windows wouldn't close, and there was a long, empty upstairs hallway that had a door to nowhere outside of it. And if anything on this property was going to be haunted, it would be that place. I could start my own military. Maybe I could turn this into a barracks. Fit what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 12, 13 soldiers in here comfortably. I decided to make a mixing room that would be extremely insulated sound-wise, and then a common area that would be a hybrid between a sound stage and a modular workspace for other people in case I ever decided to scale and hire an editor or something. But I almost always work alone, and I wanted a way where I could leave a camera mounted in one spot and then turn to various shots. And everything would need to be monitored and remotely controlled from every single shooting location, including lighting, which would need to be mounted on the ceiling and plugged into a separate circuit entirely to prevent line noise. I don't think that there's a person watching this video who hasn't heard this sound. Most people call it a ground loop. I do not, because that's assuming that it's being caused by a loop of grounding signals. This is one of the many potential causes of a ground hum, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I designed this studio to have absurdly clean power, so there's a very low noise floor, and it was a lot of theories and guesswork. You cannot design a studio to be immune to ground noise or interference because everything in your studio has a failure point, and also because physics. So all of the power is coming from the main building, my house, underground to a 100 amp sub panel here. And it is immediately broken into HVAC circuits, lighting circuits, audio circuits, and general use circuits. And there are 3 deep grounding rods with HVAC and lighting sharing 1. The general use circuits and the audio circuits go through surge protection and battery backup with pure sine output. And then the audio circuit goes through a toroidal transformer, which is a really, really good way to further isolate the circuit from the others. I often see people on the internet calling isolation transformers snake oil, and yeah, that's not necessarily true. I would say that if you have a small noise filter like this, or this, then it's at best just removing the ground, which could also add a different type of noise and also lead to your death should you spill a can of energy drink on your laptop. Generally, with something like an isolation transformer, the bigger and heavier, the better. The more coils that you have for electricity to run through, then the more isolated it will be when it comes out the other side. You can run an additional ground to the chassis, or you could replace it with a ground to another circuit or a different rod outside. So when you do run into an electrical noise issue, there are a lot of different things to try. While we're talking about electrical safety here, let me tell you about how I got shocked. Believe it or not from customizing crazy spools of copper routing 3 different lines in one room. I was walking under a hanging live wire and neutral wire when an electrician turned the power on from the mains. Not good. My scheme to reduce electrical noise worked marvelously, and my most recent monthly power bill was $879 using a total of 4,038 kilowatt hours. Holy shit. The average single family home in North America uses 900 kilowatt hours, and here in Georgia, where it's pretty hot and humid, it's closer to 1,500, but still, 4,000 is so excessive that something had to be wrong. So I rewired my entire circuit box and installed sensors on 16 different circuits in my main power box so I could see exactly where all of this energy was going. I'm not 100% sure yet, but it seems like I was just a complete dumbass in keeping my AC way too low in both buildings when there was a major heat wave. The contractors left the windows and doors open all day and night while running the AC at like 69 Fahrenheit. And then on top of that, I had this massive industrial air scrubber and then 3 other air filters running non-stop for over an entire week. And I did some other common sense things like replacing the halogen bulbs that came with the house with LEDs. And so far, I've cut my energy usage by 50%. Fingers crossed, because I am not sure how well solar panels would work under a tree canopy. All right, so climate. I'm a big fan of mini splits, and a lot of my viewers may not even know what that is. And if you're living in North America, it's not your fault at all if you don't know what that is. Mini splits are these things. They heat, cool, ventilate, and dehumidify a room, and you can have multiple room units per outdoor condenser and control the climate in each room individually. They're also really efficient and quiet in comparison to most central AC or window units. They're everywhere in Europe and Asia, so why aren't they more popular in the USA? By the way, I'm gonna go on a little bit of a rant here, and if you don't care about HVAC HVAC or air conditioning, do yourself a favor and just go to the next section of this video. My take on the reason that mini splits aren't more popular in North America is because in my last studio, I installed one all by myself in about 6 hours. I imagine it would have taken an experienced HVAC installer much less time, and installing a full central AC unit in a single family home can cost as much as $15,000. So let me ask you this, if you owned a heating and cooling business, why in the world would you prioritize training your employees on installing more cost and labor efficient devices when you could make far more money running ductwork and balancing pressurized refrigerants? But don't get me wrong, mini splits are not like the end all be all solution to HVAC though, and if you're actually building a space to be a recording studio, the ideal setup would be to have a central heating and cooling unit where your return vents were nowhere near where you'll be mixing or recording audio. That way you don't have to shut off your heat or AC to record. And then the mini split can be complementary to a highly insulated studio room that gets a bit too humid or warm with all the gear blowing out heat. This is actually a bit unorthodox to most HVAC installers, and in this case, it actually required a few do-overs. It's obviously not the most efficient way to run heating or air conditioning, but it's in the 90s outside right now, and the air conditioner, which is right above me, is running, and it sounds like this. And more importantly, in my mixing room, I honestly have no idea if it's running or not. The internet hookup was actually not complicated at all, but it became an absolute nightmare for very dumb reasons. The area around this mountain is being developed very quickly, and luckily they've future-proofed the whole area with 10 gigabit fiber connections. It was already installed in my house, but AT&T refused to install it in the studio unless I uninstalled it from the house. No amount of arguing could cut the pointless red tape and just have them set up fiber on 2 different accounts in 2 different buildings. So fine, don't take my money. So I decided to run fiber under the driveway alongside the power line that was already running to the studio from the house. And one area of that line was cracked underground, and no amount of lube could get fish taped through the 70-foot line. We even brought in somebody who runs fiber lines outside for a living. No dice. We tried digging up the line to find the problem, and I tried to break ground by stomping on a shovel directly on a hidden rock. About 3 hours later, I was here, getting diagnosed with a fractured cuboid. Okay, so plan B, line of sight wireless internet to the rescue. Using these 2 antennas, I could run up to 1 gigabit per second to the house from the studio after having AT&T hook up the fiber to the studio only. Because remember, they won't hook them up to both. But I also had to run highly insulated Ethernet cable hundreds of feet under the porch, which was more like a Japanese game show challenge than a chore. The antennas themselves are powered by power over Ethernet injectors, so power going through the Ethernet line, and once I aligned them properly, they worked flawlessly. Honestly, better than I ever could have imagined. Until 2 nights ago, when we had a severe storm and lightning struck very close nearby. It fried my power over Ethernet injector and my Wi-Fi router in the house, and fortunately didn't damage anything in the studio. So as of right now, to share my internet to the house, I just shelled out like $300 for a Wi-Fi mesh setup, but ultimately I'm just going to have to trench and terminate fiber like I initially intended. This part was the most ambitious by far because I was being extremely budget-minded. Obviously, a channel like this gets a lot of messages from pro audio manufacturers, distributors, and retailers, and while it would be possible to get a $30,000 Dolby Atmos system professionally installed and tuned at a massive discount, I do not want to be dependent on those types of services or budgets unless I could pay for them myself. There seems to be this hierarchy that I've experienced for the last couple decades where the cost of your recording studio defines the quality of your recording studio, and I am absolutely on the opposite side of that. If you are engineering solid mixes in a shed with freeware plugins on $30 computer speakers, you are a god to me. I have tried a lot of monitors, which means a flat EQ'd speaker for mixing audio, not a computer screen or lizard, in this case anyway. Now, of course, this is all very subjective to my taste, so I don't want to just list off all the ones that I've sampled and didn't like or ordered and returned, but I was really picky. Over the last 6 months, I've talked to a lot of different companies about very technical questions, but I have a friend at Cali Audio who is really laid back and honest about this stuff, and he kind of challenged me to try some IN8s with a WS12 12-inch sub. The IN8s cost $400 each, which is not the price point where one would expect any sort of professional calibration or quality control. I put the IN8s through a lot of testing in my old mix room, in my living room of my house, and then ultimately in my mixing room here. And they're my primary monitors now. I feel like the perfect monitor is one that you never ever think about. And after tuning that room, I never adjusted or messed with them again. I don't know how the hell you accomplished this at that price point, Callie, but props. This probably isn't news to anybody who's watching this who's a content creator, but if you have a video or streaming channel, pretty much every computer or gaming furniture company in the world just sends an army of reps to your email address, usually ending up in the spam folder. And this has created this entirely new economy of sorts for me, where computer chairs have absolutely no monetary value at all, but are only valued in how I feel after sitting in them for 18 hours a day. And I also can't sit still, so the problem for me is that they're always falling apart or ripping. And I was looking at an eWin Flash XL chair, as it's apparently really heavy duty and built for rhinoceroses, and sure enough, I have been hit up by a rep, and it took a little convincing to get them to send me their most expensive chair, but it's been about a month and I literally have no complaints. You know what I like about this thing? It has really powerful magnets in it. Like, so you just be like, oh, I want a head pillow. There's even a magnet in these arm pads here. You could like store some MDMA in here. Woo! Just praying, officer. So if you're watching this video a year from now, go check out my streaming channel. And if in my last stream I'm still sitting in this chair, then it means that it survived the ultimate punishment of a 200-pound antsy dude sitting on his legs for absurd periods of time. Now onto the studio desk. Okay, this one's a bit of a doozy. I wanted a desk that was heavy duty, could hold my absurdly wide screen and speakers at eye and ear level, had a few rack spaces for preamp and audio interfaces, and a slide-out tray that would hold my Arturia 88-key MIDI controller. I measured out my leg height and length and all of the gear that would be stationary on the desk, and the only thing I could find that would fit, other than a custom build, which would take much longer than the time that I had, was a RAB ProRack MK88, which was a $1,700 desk. So if you go to RAB Audio's website and you want to buy this desk directly, you cannot. They only sell it through retailers. Okay, the only retailer that had it in stock that I had ever ordered anything from previously was Sweetwater, and on their page they said that it's shipped by RAB Audio. Okay, I put in the order for the desk on May 10th, and then later got a call from Sweetwater telling me that I'd have to pay a couple $100s in shipping. Okay, then I got another call saying that I would have to pay liftgate fees and charges. Okay, this desk is now costing me well beyond $2,000. So a few weeks go by, and nobody can give me any estimates or information on when this thing's actually gonna show up.
Sweetwater's general support line. Your call is very important to us.
Nearly 6 weeks later, just as I'm about to dispute the charges, a FedEx truck shows up, refuses to bring the liftgate truck on private property, and then proceeds to drop this massive package in the middle of the road about 400 feet downhill from my house and like a quarter mile from the studio. Fortunately, as luck would have it, at that particular time, on that particular day, there were a ton of construction workers on the property that I could pay to help me push it up a hill.
Thank you.
And then a few weeks later, it had to be lifted back on the truck and driven to the other side of the property near the studio. But finally, the desk was in the studio, assembled, and damaged.
Look at this. It's cracked, it's raised, it's pretty bad.
To make matters worse, the measurements online were not accurate. Even the desk at its highest height and my chair at its lowest height, I still couldn't fit into the desk with the keyboard tray, and I had to remove it. Sweetwater did try to send me another desk and get this one sent back, but ultimately the shipping and labor to move these things cost more than the desk's value. I didn't get any discount or refund, and unfortunately the desk can't even be repaired because it's pressboard with a plastic laminate surface, which I didn't expect from a $1,700 desk being sold by a company that lists an Indiana address on their website. But after further investigation, that address, of course, would turn out to just be a shipping terminal, and what I got was a $500 Amazon desk directly from China that otherwise would have had free shipping. So yeah, fair game. Y'all got me good. Moral of the story is don't buy an expensive desk online without seeing or using it first. I think the most annoying part of this entire experience is still ahead of me, because when I do have a custom desk built and throw this one out, I'm gonna have to pay a disposal company to take it because, 'cause the plastic laminate shit won't burn in my fire pit. So my old studio was utterly dead and flat, and it was actually a bit of an anechoic chamber, which is great on paper. But spending years working long days in a room like that makes listening to music exhausting and distracting. Ear exhaustion is a thing that most people working in audio engineering have experienced, but I was trying to figure out and understand exactly how it worked in my case. So with me, for example, I will go into my kitchen and play music on the Bluetooth speaker and respond to emails with no distraction whatsoever. For some reason, in that old mixing room, any unintentional sound seemed to break my train of thought. It was an extremely quiet room, but I could subtly hear loud cars passing outside. And just like music, it would distract me, which is weird because I spent the majority of my life living in high-density areas of Chicago without ever experiencing anything like this. So the goal this time around was to have a more normal-sounding room that was still more or less dry and had a flat EQ curve. I started reading more into how sonic crystals were being used in super fancy offices or venues to guide sound to ideal places. Unfortunately, I don't have $70,000 to spend on customized sonic crystals, but fortunately I do have Gardner, a friend of mine who is quite the expert at this sort of thing, who single-handedly built Mr. Bill's mixing room a few years ago. And he has a YouTube channel too that talks about this stuff all the time. Link below. So we designed these panels made from 2x4s, rock wool, and a special type of dyed landscape canvas. And so while Gardner was building the physical panels, I was mocking up a bunch of simulations in a physics engine called Bullet. I had no idea if this would actually work, by the way, so I hung them using turnbuckles instead of wire because I wanted to be able to easily make precise adjustments in real time while tuning the room and listening to audio. And I kid you not, hanging and tuning these giant heavy-ass panels was by far the worst part of this entire project. I have no idea why I was so stubborn to need to do it all by myself, but it was hell. And so when the ceiling panels were finally up, there were certain areas in there where it sounded really wonky, and if I want to upgrade to Dolby Atmos at some point or something like that, I would need to fix things. So I patched up some of those reflective areas with more panels, and then I needed some way bigger bass traps on those back walls because my low end was just out of control. And then I had finally achieved a good absorption coefficient and room EQ curve. I kept it for like half a day and then just decided to come back the next morning. I fine-tuned the room without looking at any graphs whatsoever. I still haven't seen a graph of what the room is right now because I just want it the way I want it. And I love it. It's wonderful. My more challenging to the ears unreleased stuff actually sounds really good on here. I think I'm happy. In the past, I've never been a huge fan of the standard offerings of security systems because I feel like I'd just be paying a subscription fee to watch somebody rob me, but this place is a little bit different. I designed the system to have two different tiers or levels, and the first tier has cameras all over the property running on their own solar-charged batteries, then window sensors, motion detectors, even some little hidden things in the woods that tell me when somebody or something is approaching from my driveway or from the trail behind my house. And then there's a siren set up, and it also calls the police for specific triggers, and the only other neighbor up on this hill is really protective of it, which is super helpful. Ultimately, a good security system has a lot of redundancy. I'm not going to talk about level 2 publicly, but it's as high-tech and psychotic as you would expect from me. The stress and emotional toll is very real. There is so much vlog footage of me being completely wrong about what's going on or just utterly unreasonable and impatient. This whole thing f***ing sucks. I really just hate my life right now. It's miserable, and I just want to make music and get this over with as quickly as possible. Ultimately, with all things considered, this type of project was way too big for one person to manage properly. So every single time that a mistake was made or somebody didn't do their job correctly or somebody was late, it threw a wrench into everything else. The drywall people have been a no-show, which makes me really nervous because I thought they were going to start over the weekend, and drywall is like a 3-day process. So for example, I'd get a finish date lockdown with the contractors, and then I'd go through the process of getting mover estimates and comparing them, and then booking movers and getting help packing. And then 1 or 2 of the workers would not show up for 2 days. And then I'd have to rebook everything and get all the estimates again, and I'd even lose deposits. And my initial reaction was to get mad at the contractor, but like, sometimes people just can't go to work. These things are a normal part of project management. The floor is a bit uneven in places. I noticed it in the studio room and insisted that we put in self-leveling concrete. but I should have insisted it everywhere. I just didn't notice enough to be bothered until it was too late. I would say that the thing that threw me the furthest off schedule at the worst time was construction dust. That stuff is no joke. I had all the gear moved in here, but then I couldn't unpack it for nearly a week while the industrial air scrubber did its thing. All the boxes were stacked everywhere, so it made doing anything difficult. When it came to hiring movers and that whole process, I hands down have never had a worse moving experience. I had to hire 2 other moving companies to fix what the first moving company did. Oh yeah, this property just kind of had this gardener named Jesus who cared for and maintained the property for years. He's really good and he seemed to be a really sweet guy, but he sent me an invoice for like 5 times more than what the previous owner was paying. And I feel like that was probably the opening number on a negotiation, but the whole thing just kind of gave me the ick and made me realize that I don't want anybody all up in my business on the property. Even though it's a lot of work, I also think that I should be tending the land myself. It's like a rite of passage to fully enjoy living here. It's also good exercise. I got 5 more chickens, they're teenagers, and all the chickens are now finally warming up to me. Other than that, it's just a ton of work getting acclimated. So how much do you think all of this cost? While this channel is a nonprofit, all of this was paid for out of my personal savings. My original budget was $80,000, and the construction contract with Southern Superior was capped at $70,500. And after a lot of debating and wrestling, that ended up getting pushed $4,500 higher. Then I didn't realize that that contract didn't cover blinds or shelves or toilet paper holders or bulbs. Then there was a problem where the toilet was not flushing number 2 and the sewage line had to be dug up and completely reseeded, and that had to come out of my pocket. That wasn't part of the contractual budget. I had to rent dumpsters. All of this added up to a few more $1,000. Then the acoustic panels and then all of the other sound insulation and dampening cost about $3,500 for the entire building. It's hard to do the math precisely this soon, but the total budget for this studio should land me around $110,000, way over what I planned on spending. So check out my OnlyFans. I told them that it's impossible to cut down that hickory tree with a skill saw. It's in the way of my line of sight internet.
See? Nice blade. Yeah, the blade's done. I can't believe you did it. Amazing. I'm in disbelief. Well, you win. By the way, if you're wondering how I earned the money to pay for all of this, that's obviously a much different discussion. I'm not really cryptic about it, but it kind of leaves the scope of this video. This channel operates as a nonprofit organization, and none of this studio stuff was paid for through that nonprofit or from Patreon income. While that would have made my life way less stressful, I don't ever want to be in a situation where I have to buy my own studio gear off of my business should that business cease to exist. However, I do intend on some things being maintained through that nonprofit income, such as hired camera people or services or journalism insurance or rental equipment with special projects or research. This transparency and honesty is why this channel works and why I feel so confident that scaling the whole thing is the right move. It provides things that there's extremely high demand for in 2024. Communication without paid promotion or marketing guiding its direction. Content where the primary goal can never not include an unbiased analysis of data. For my own personal taste and reasons, I'm calling the building Time Loop. If you have any additional questions, let me know in the comments, and I'd like to cover them in an upcoming stream. If you enjoyed this video, or if you learned anything and you want to be part of all of the ambitious projects we have coming in the future, and if you want to participate in an incredibly creative and motivating community that has monthly songwriting challenges, and if you want loads of audio assets and music and even some coupons, you can join my Patreon for as little as $1. Thank you for watching. Keep creating. Bye.